Okay, afternoon everybody. Hi. We all right? Everyone okay? I know this is the graveyard shift. Last talk before the end of the day. People are thinking about the sunshine and the beach and all those things, but hey ho. So am I. So, I'm Matt, as the slide says. I've been doing Agile things for a while. It's a long while. It's too long, actually. Well, no, it's not too long, but it's been a long time. Actually, probably about 20 years now. But I digress. During that time, I've been working in what some people have called transformations. And some of them have been transformations and some of them haven't. But yeah, I think I've probably spent at least 7 years inside things that large enterprises are saying, yeah, we're doing an Agile transformation. And yeah, it's worth trying to give back some of that to people who may be thinking about going on a transformation rather than just watching people make the same, I was going to say mistakes, but let's say patterns, shall we? Patterns. It's all an adventure, but why not learn from some other patterns that other people have seen elsewhere? So this talk is basically about that. So let's start with the concept of a transformation. So what's that actually mean? Oh, we're having an Agile transformation. Right, cool, great. So if you look it up, so a transformation is a marked change in form, nature, or appearance. So this would suggest that actually at the end of a transformation, things look quite different than they do at the start. I realize I'm not breaking any barriers here too much. This sounds fairly straightforward, I hope. But equally, it's all thinking, well, why do we need to do that? And someone said to me about a year or two ago, actually, and I thought this was very true. They said, you know what? Transformations are either for the bold or the desperate. Because to be honest, if things are kind of all right-ish, you don't need to change the way they are. You might want to evolve things, you might want to, adapt and improve, but actually you don't need to transform. Transformations are, oh my God, it's all broken, we need to change the shape of the world or potentially go out of business. Really, those are kind of key drivers. We have a massive burning platform, be it, I don't know, technical or process or whatever. We've got stuff we need to change. So organizations go, let's have a transformation. Now, transformations are funny things, and I've seen slides like this in the past where people say, you know what? We're going to go from this car at the top and we're going to become a racing car. Yeah, this is what we're going to be like. We're going to be this lean, mean fighting machine at the end of our transformation, and we don't want to be a Honda, we want to be a Formula 1 car. Nothing wrong with Honda, I hasten to add. But they then follow it with things like, well, how are we going to do that? And it's usually some sort of mixed media involving, well, typically fairy dust, often Yoda, and then a shadowy group of ninjas in the background who are going to do some work. But this sort of movement from one to the other is well, firstly, highly aspirational and usually fairly unnecessary, but also not really very well considered. Now, I take a fairly different view to transformations, actually, when organizations say they want to do it. So this is a P 1996 Vauxhall Astra. Some of you in the room may have owned one, I don't know. I think it's probably a perfectly decent car. And this is the current new Vauxhall Astra. Again, a perfectly reasonable car. I'm sure some of you in the room may well have owned one. Or interestingly, outwardly, they both look broadly the same, I would say. They're both badged the same. They're kind of similar-ish. But every single component inside them is totally different. So when I talk about transformations, actually, when organizations say we're doing a transformation, they're not saying we want to turn from being Boots to Waitrose. Actually, they're just saying we want to be a better version of Boots. Outwardly, we may look a little bit different, a bit more shiny, but not too much. But inwardly, we could be totally different. We will be transformed. So it's worth thinking that actually, you don't need to start drawing pictures of race cars. Actually, you're just trying to say there's stuff we can do better. And typically in what are Agile transformations, there are people who do help, and it's not Yoda and it's not fairy dust. There's usually a shadowy group of figures in the background who are there to grease the wheels and help that journey, and they're typically Agile coaches, people like me, who try and enable that to happen. Now, I've talked here about, okay, let's move from a 1996 to, it's probably a 2017 or something, Astra. That's great. Some organizations actually start here. That is the first Vauxhall Astra I think that was ever made. Anyone had one of these? Yeah. Yeah? Oh, fabulous. Oh, amazing. Brilliant. Did you like it?
Loved it.
Good. Super. Okay, so thinking that we need to change stuff inside organizations. I was having a chat with a colleague of mine, probably 2 or 3 years ago now, actually, and we started talking about technical debt. And you're probably thinking, well, technical debt, that's fine, that's codey stuff. What's that got to do with organizations? And for those of you who aren't over familiar with the phrase of technical debt, there's a definition. I'm not saying it's the ultimate one, but it's a definition. And I said, you know what? I think I've seen this. But I've seen it slightly differently. I've seen it in this thing that I'm going to call organizational debt. I kind of just coined this in the conversation. And that's the definition which I came up with because it's kind of my thing. So actually, I think organizations have this concept of, you know what? We're just going to keep building debt into ourselves that we then maybe have to fix. And by way of example, has anyone here been in an organization where, I don't know, HR have gone and bought their own system? Or payroll have gone and done something that doesn't mix with another part of the business? Or a PMO has said, we're going to use this tool set because it suits what we need? Or another department, as yet undescribed, goes and does their own thing too. It's funny, this is exactly the same mechanism that we see in code bases where we go, we need to get a quick win. So organizations do this all the time, but then don't necessarily think about how they pay it back. And this is often where I see organizations find themselves in this situation where we need to have a transformation. Because actually, their organizational debt has got so much that actually from a platform perspective, you'd say, you know what, we've just got to rewrite this thing. And from an organizational perspective, they're going, you know what, we really need to transform this thing. So thinking a little bit more about that, in the same conversation, and this is a friend of mine called Nick, actually, Nick Silver. Some of you may know him, he's an Agile coach. He'd written an article in which he drew this chart, which I thought, that's quite interesting. He said, you know what? In the technical environment, if we sort of down tools or change tools and spend some time fixing our technical debt, something happens. If the blue line was effectively our original velocity that we were being able to deliver stuff at, and obviously the green line shows that we have better velocity afterwards, the world's a better place, but actually that payback is quite some time after fixing the technical debt. And I thought, you know what, that makes some good sense. I'll bet I could apply that to my new concept I've just invented called organizational debt. And so I did. And it looked like this. So I kind of took the view with my blue line that stuff's probably getting worse. There are probably people saying, you know what, it's not like it was back in the day. We could release stuff 3 years ago. We can't do it now. Stuff's harder, stuff's awkward. I hate it. Why can't we go backwards? I'm leaving. Lots of noise like that you tend to hear in organizations that are considering transformation. So stuff's getting a bit worse. And equally, I've drawn my green line with a curve up because often people get larger consultancies involved in transformations. This could be 2 years, this could be 3 years, and there is no way they're going to say, you know what, you're going to have absolutely no gains through that period and then get them all afterwards, so it's a bit of a curve. But the thought still occurred to me that actually, if you go through the pain of a transformation, the point that you actually get the payback is beyond the end. Now, ultimately, that payback could be, we're still in business. We didn't go bust. The world is still around us and we're still here. So it's not to say don't do these things. Do these things, but it isn't just fairy dust, magic and sparkles. Actually going through the pain of a transformation is significant. Because let's face it, you're changing tons of stuff. And if you put new work into a system, the system will respond, things will slow down. You can't say to your development teams who are all working in a certain way, we're going to totally change the way you're working and train you in how to do it and do a load of stuff and want you to attend things and could you still work at the same rate? Doesn't necessarily work that way. So, transformations, let's just stick with that word for a moment. Agile transformations. This is a quote, and I forget who it's from, so apologies, but it's nothing new. If you Google it, you will find it. Successful agile transformation needs to be driven top down and bottom up. It needs to be championed, embodied, and enacted at all levels of the organization. Rah! Absolutely yes. Everyone nods in the room, I'm sure. Yes, good, brilliant. And inside large corporates, what happens is someone at the top says, yes, I completely agree with you. Can you go and embody that for me and come back and tell me at the end that you've done it, and I'll tick the box and tell Jeff on the golf course that my organization is just as good as his. Yep, I've seen some nods. It's not just me. It's interesting. So driven top down, bottom up, needs to be championed, embodied. enacted. There's all some powerful stuff in here, but this isn't groundbreaking. Now, anyone here heard of a company called Version 1? They have a tool set, and they also do the Agile State of the Nation survey every single year. Has anyone seen the survey? Yeah, most people. Does anyone read it? Because I'm convinced nobody reads it, actually. Because every single year it says the same thing. Company culture continues to dominate the top causes of failed Agile projects, with company philosophy or culture at odds with core Agile values. And I've circled the things that relate to cultural value. We've got lack of management support, lack of support for cultural transition, company philosophy at odds, blah, 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 ineffective collaboration. The message is always fairly clear inside that. And then what are barriers to further adoption? This is just another section in the same report. So what are they? Well, the top three there: ability to change organizational culture, general organizational resistance to change, pre-existing rigid waterfall framework. So what we're repeatedly having pointed out to us, and this has been running for what, 11 or 12 years now, I think, and it always says the same things, is actually if you need to do a transformation, you have to change a bunch of stuff, mostly relating to culture. So culture, there's a funny word. What's that mean? Now, if I was an anthropologist, which I'm not, I would say, or could say, and Jeff Patton looked into this, and he said, you know what, cultures, they've got a bunch of stuff. They've got some things that you can see that differentiate them and make them what they are. They have a language, they have stories and myths and legends and jokes and rituals, rites, ceremonies, celebrations. I realise I'm reading my slide. Folkways, assumptions, models, symbols, technology, artifacts. They have these things that make them a culture. Be it a tribe in Borneo or whatever, you name it. Now, it's funny, actually, when you start thinking about Agile. We have our own language. Actually, to us, a stand-up means a thing. We know what that means. To other people, it just sounds stupid. Why we have chairs. We've got stories. We wang on about some old guys who went skiing a long time ago or worked on the 3C program at Chrysler. We have heroes. We have legends. We have stuff that in our back catalogue as Agilists, which it's all in there. We even have jokes, not good ones, I hasten to add. We've got ceremony. We've got bags of ceremonies. Actually, we have them every day. We have celebrations every 2 weeks. We like celebrating. We've got values, norms, laws. Do complexity points equal man days? Oh no. We've got things. And we've got our own technology. We've got artifacts. We've got radiator boards. We've got Trello. We've got stuff that's basically ours. So, heck, well, where does that actually take you? It takes you here, that actually being agile is actually a culture. Ooh. So if you're talking about an agile transformation, actually you're talking about a change in culture. And a lot of organizations I've found say, oh, well, actually, we really love our corporate culture, but we need to change. Okay, I'm not quite sure how we're going to work around that one. So I found that quite fascinating. That led me somewhere else, and I'll just quote Peter Drucker because everybody does. Ooh, there's something else. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So often enterprises have big strategies, but actually they can't deliver them because they don't have the culture in which to do it. And really, this agile transformation lark is actually about saying, sod strategy, let's focus on culture and see if that gives us a strategy. If you're considering a transformation, which some of you in the room may be, you may have come here thinking, oh, I'll just get some pointers because our organization is doing this. Here's just a little mental note for you. Actually, most coaches can't teach culture. Some can, some can't. I know some brilliant coaches who do a ton of stuff I don't do, often techie areas and teamy stuff, and I have spheres of influence. Don't assume that the coaches that you have can solve your problems in this space. So, that's all very well, but where do you start? We're going to do a transformation. Everyone says people, process, technology, so I'll say people, process, technology. This is always a good place to start. It's a change program across these areas of an enterprise. But guess what? if you're trying to change culture, there's this thing called culture shock. Feeling of disorientation experienced by someone when they are suddenly subjected to an unfamiliar culture, way of life, or set of attitudes and beliefs. Now, if I turn to I don't know, let's say a development function and say, guys, you're now going to use this strange thing you've never heard of called Scrum. That's interesting. And it's back. So this is unfamiliar to them. These are new patterns. And actually, I'm going to talk to them about attitude and say, really, actually, I need you guys to be much more collaborative and open and honest and talk to each other and work together and be self-empowered and self-organizing. This is rattling their cages a bit, actually. Now, culture shock's a very interesting thing because it's not actually all negative. And everyone, I reckon, in this room has experienced it one way or another. Because it actually has 4 stages. You can look it up. First stage is this honeymoon period. Oops. And then you lead into this frustration period, followed by adjustment, and then acceptance. Now, I realise through that sneaky click there that I haven't actually muted the next 2 slides, which is covered in words, so I'm going to use them anyway. Honeymoon stage, you guys have experienced. When you go on holiday somewhere, okay, you go to, I don't know, let's say Barbados, just for fun. You go and it's amazing. You get off the plane and it's superb, it's warm, everyone's smiling. You get to your hotel, it seems fabulous, you name it. Everyone who goes on holiday has this amazingly warm bias towards where they go. It's totally different. And actually, typically on your holiday of 2 weeks or 1 week or 3 weeks or whatever, when you leave, you are still in your honeymoon period. This is why people often go, oh, I'd love to go and live there. But actually, the next thing that follows is frustration. When you discover that the water pressure is rubbish, you can't have a shower after certain times, or the electricity goes off, or you can't buy Bovril or Marmite or insert another product in the store, or you can't speak the language, or whatever. You just get annoyed with it. And actually, people often want to, at this point, go home, actually. Often when people emigrate, they have a honeymoon experience, and then they very soon say, oh, I wish I was back at home. I could go and get a pint of beer. My brother lives in Singapore. He just misses our weather. He just likes some rain or some mist or something. So we have this frustration stage. Now, interestingly, as this slide says, small things can be very annoying. Actually, oh, I've lost something. You know, people are disproportionately angry in their frustration stage. Tiny things can set them off. And you may have seen this if you're in organisations that have attempted moving to Agile. You'll get people who are quite snappy. Oh, they're miserable today. Why is that? It's because they're just dealing with a culture shock. And people can spend ages in this stage. Now, following that, you've got adjustment. People get the hang of it. Actually, I now know if I want to order a beer in here, I use these words and whatever gestures. And actually, the guys are quite nice. And I'm learning a few words of the language, and I know that after 10 o'clock I can't have a shower, but it doesn't matter, I'll just change my routines. This is all fine, this is adjustment, and then eventually you kind of naturalise, you accept it. And as the slide there says, actually, sometimes weeks, months, or years after wrestling with the stages above, you kind of get there. So when people talk about we're going on an Agile transformation, I say, well, great, good. But let's recognise you're going to put your employees, your people, the people that you know, love, and cherish, on a roller coaster of a journey that will take them through these stages. Now, some people will skip from honeymoon to acceptance in a moment. You'll have them inside your enterprises. Oh, I've been wanting to go Agile for years, let's go do it. I've been reading about it quietly anyway. You'll have other people that do not want to do it at all. Actually, they will sort of eye up honeymoon but not really want to do it and kind of overstep it straight into frustration. That happens. Anyway, it's worth recognising. Because the funny thing is, I suppose the underpin is, people don't really like change. Although I should caveat, I think when I wrote this slide, maybe I should have written, people don't like change being done to them. Because we like change if we're steering it, but actually, when our enterprise is telling us that we are changing, maybe we like it less. And here's another thing tied to that. Actually, companies don't actually like change either. It kind of works. Yes, we think we need a transformation, but we're just rolling dice at this point. It could be good, could be bad. Who knows? So, let's all assume actually we're going on this journey and we are going to do our transformation inside our enterprise. Where is the first place you start? Let's assume some seniors said, oh, we're going to do this thing, and they're embodying it from the top, and we're sort of broadly in charge. Any thoughts? Okay, I tend to start with these fun-loving guys here. This slide represents the HR department, obviously. Because they're all like this, aren't they? One of the most successful Agile transformations I was involved in, something fascinating happened 3 months before the actual and now we are going to adopt a new way of working. It was actually a large SAFe transformation. So they were really going full bore, scaled Agile, enterprise change. 3 months before it started, they put the entire of the, let's just call them product and development community, about 300 and something people, they put them on notice of redundancy. All of them. Because that's what you do, isn't it? If you think about where they were a waterfall organization, and every single one of those people was tied to their employment contract and their job specification. They had terms of reference that they were engaged upon. I am a project manager, this is what I do. I will report in this way, I will do these things. It might even say I will use these frameworks. This is my contract with you as an organization. The organization itself had to break or change all of those contracts to be able to say to people, guys, we're going to work in a new way, we're going to do things differently. You may become a business analyst instead of a senior project manager. So one guy do that. That was great, actually. He was very successful at it. Okay, you may turn into a scrum master, you may not, but you've got to shuffle the cards around. You are making change. You're changing people's jobs and their lives and their terms of engagement. So you have to do it properly. If you have unions inside your organization, you may well need to get them involved. Because you can't just say, you project manager, tomorrow you're a scrum master. You can, but you can have a constructive dismissal claim on your hands very quickly. I'd advise not to. It can get expensive. Where'd you go next? Any thoughts where you might go next after HR? No, okay, all right. I tend to go here. Yeah, this is facilities. They're an interesting bunch of people. Lovely, always lovely. So why'd you go to facilities? Any thoughts?
Change of setup.
Absolutely. Change of setup. I've been in some organizations that will have banned blue tack. Because clearly it's evil. You know, carcinogenic, possibly, I don't know. But a lot of organizations have very, very rigid structures about what you can and can't do. Here's an example from a company I was in, there we go, June 2018. This was in the height of football fever, and this is an email that went out to all staff. This message was sent to all colleagues. Football World Cup fever is in full force. However, we'd like to remind everyone that hanging decorations and physical games is prohibited within office areas. There are a few reasons as to why this practice has been put in place. Flags, buntings, and other hanging decorations pose health and safety risks during AC and lighting maintenance activities that occur within ceiling spaces, as do inflatable football goals and footballs being kicked around the office during normal day-to-day business activity. So the owners of these types of items described above, please remove them by close of play tomorrow. Plenty of time there. Otherwise, unfortunately, we will be forced to remove them and dispose of them. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. Hell, imagine trying to put up a visual radiator wall in a place like that. I often recommend going and talking to facilities and painting them a general picture of the world that you might be moving to. Change of setup, new desk, collaborative working spaces, stuff all over walls, post-it snow, you name it, just so that they don't come through of an evening and put it all back how it was. That's awkward when you've spent, 8 hours doing a road mapping exercise. So, having teed up basically HR and facilities to say, guess what, there's change coming, where do you tend to go next? And I tend to go here. Let's call this the C-suite, the sort of seniorish management lot. This is obviously they're not sat in chairs there. This is a metaphor. I don't go and stand in a room and talk to furniture. And there's something interesting that happens at this level inside an organization. By way of analogy, if let's say there's 10, 11, 12, a dozen people who've been working together for some long time, sitting around a table, but actually, let's say they were a football team. Pretty good, professional, somewhere in good leagues, win games, do well, know the offside rule, win trophies, have shorts and stuff that match the tops, you name it. Let's say that's them. They were brought into that environment for their talents and abilities in playing football. That's what they're there for. They all know how each other play football, and it's what they do. So imagine what happens when somebody walks into that environment and says, guys, this is brilliant, you're great at this, and we love you, but we're just going to tweak the rules slightly. So, yeah, actually, we're not going to be playing football anymore. We're going to be playing rugby. Now, you can imagine this conversation into a football team, and it's fairly similar when you have it at a sort of senior management level. Pareto principle broadly applies. A third of the people in that room will go, you know what, I've been thinking about rugby quietly for a while. I'm really up for a game of rugby. Let's do that. I fancy that. About a third of them will say, you know what, hadn't thought of that, let's give it a go. And a third of them will say, I am a football player. I joined this team to play football. I don't want to play rugby. So, how does that align with a group of senior execs? Well, sometimes you need a bit of this. Yes, sometimes you need to change management, because some of them don't actually want to be there, and it's not their fault. If they were recruited for a certain set of skills and beliefs and ways of working, and you are changing the skills and beliefs and ways of working inside an enterprise, it's not their fault they don't want to change. Actually, they should be embraced and thanked and given a good-sized check and helped to leave. Because they're not going to thrive with your new goal, and you're not going to thrive with them in it. This is all good stuff. So actually, this is worth noting. Do not treat the number of people leaving a transformation as a measure of failure. Because actually, if nothing changed and people stayed, it would suggest you didn't really do very much. If everyone was still there doing, yeah, it's all still fine. So just think about that one. I sometimes get, in large transformations, if someone tells me, we did a 2-year Agile transformation and nobody left, I say, how much actually changed? We'll see. So let's dive back to these chaps again. Interestingly, if I look at an organization across different areas, engineering down here, development here, product shaping, strategy, this is very high-tist, this, isn't it? Yeah, I should put it down a bit. Actually, hang on. Oh, got a pointer. I'm armed. If I do this in a minute and people have their cataracts, sorry. Anyway, right, so if you look at, I feel really bad using a pointer. It seems, I'm going to stick with this. If you look at these areas and you look at the areas of a business, they have different emphasis. In engineering, actually, it's highly about tech. There's a chunk of process, DevOps, it's process. And, there's some lovely people in there, but it's not really about people. If I move in the development space, you'll see the profile changes slightly. It's still heavily tech, still lots of process, but actually development, in Scrum, we talk about self-organizing teams, people working together, all those goodness things about courage and focus and respect and all that. That's all lovely. And as you move into the product space, actually, it becomes more people-y. Hey, customers, they're people. And, process flows, actually customer flows, things like that. And less about tech, actually, because tech will get solved down here. And by the time you get to corporate strategy, actually, wow, it should really be people-y. Actually, what do our customers want in 2 years' time? Actually, where do we want to be as an enterprise? How do we want to feel about our organization? When we have transformed, what does it look like? So there's a kind of a pattern here. If you look at the blue goes up, and then you've got this goes down. So just a general note, really, is when you are looking at a transformation, recognize that different areas of your business need an entirely different emphasis. And I don't have it in for coaches because I am one, but just recognize this, actually, that you can't use the same trainer, see what I did there, in all those different areas. Because actually, you need totally different skill sets. In the engineering space, do not put me there as a coach. I know some brilliant coaches who talk about stuff I do not understand. Cucumber. What's that? Anyway, so bear that in mind. Now, here's another thing. I'm going to say the largest No. I'm going to say 4 very large transformations I've been involved in. If you looked at the enterprise and said, actually, what is the problem here? You have to use my pointer. Actually, the problem, if this is scale, bigger problem, is usually here in corporate strategy and really understanding product, and often over here, we can't ship stuff. Anyone else experience that sort of sensation? Yeah, okay. Normally, actually, this bit, development, tends to be fairly sort of okay. So what do you think most typical Agile transformation emphasis and activity looks like? Tends to look like that. This for me is a bit peculiar, but I can explain it to you quite well. Oh, let's train all our teams in Scrum. This is an easy thing to do. I've got 30 teams. I can tick them off one by one and say that we've got them doing Scrum, we've got a Scrum Master, and then all those good things work. This is easily measurable. You know, this is empirical evidence as to how agile we're being, because I can say we've got 32 teams doing Scrum. That's easy to do. This bit, we need to realign the top of the enterprise and get them embodying agile values and culture and all those good things, and actually really start to understand what we mean when we say product. Actually, why are we building the things we're building? Why are we approaching the market we are in a certain way? Those are harder questions to have. And equally over here in release, well, now this is where we start wandering to DevOps and usually a large amount of investment. And people here who are making investment don't tend to really understand what's going on over there. So I have often seen this shape. Now, for me, I take a much more simplistic view to what we need to do inside an organization. And I drew a very, very complicated organizational model of an enterprise, which is my 3-box model. And I've cut it down on the next slide to my 2-box model. So this is my 2-box model of an organization. You've got people who ask for stuff and people who do stuff. Sound reasonable? I've seen a lot of enterprises this happening. You get the askers telling the doers how to do stuff, and the doers actually, well, not necessarily telling, but actually suggesting what should be asked for. How often do engineers say, we're building the wrong thing? Why don't they have that? I know we shouldn't be doing this, we're doing something else. And then, as I say, the more complicated 3-box model, which is more about the transformation, it's this. So really, in any one enterprise, you've got a bunch of people who are asking for things, a bunch of people who are doing things. Note the ask box is always slightly bigger than the do. And then you've got this stuff which is monitoring it. I don't know if anyone here was in the last talk, but a lot of talk about governance. That's all in there. Now, if anyone's a lean person in the room, you might recognize here value add and non-value add. All this is adding absolutely no value whatsoever to what is being delivered. You know, when I deliver this clicker to the market, great, but actually, if we spent a fortune checking how well it got to market, it doesn't make the product any better. So really, when we talk about agile transformations, often what we're trying to do is just get rid of a whole amount of that and do that. Actually, take the word agile out of it. This is usually what most organizations are trying to do when they transform. Can we do more stuff? But interestingly, to get rid of that MVA, we have to start thinking differently. So we have to stop worrying about what we actually do and start worrying about what we're actually trying to achieve or what we're trying to deliver. Because companies often get hung up on measuring process or measuring activities. If anyone here has seen a Gantt chart with bars and 90% dones on them, and it's all activity-based. Anyone who's doing activity-based planning, please try and stop that and try doing some outcome-based planning. It will help you in any environment. Yeah. Someone said, we trained 32 Scrum teams in Scrum. Great, that was activity-based. Are they any good? Can they deliver software? Don't know, we're not measuring their output. Okay, maybe we could do that. Wouldn't it be great just to have 6 of them that are really fabulous rather than 32 of them are pretty mediocre? Who knows? So, stepping on slightly, and I really should keep an eye on the time. I know someone's going to wave at me when I've got 10 minutes to go. Ooh, are we on the 10-minute mark? Look at that. Thank you. Here's another interesting thing. I was inside an organization 2 years ago that almost convinced themselves they could do an agile transformation without using any external coaching. They did recognize this, and we actually had a good old laugh about it. But you can kind of almost convince yourself, and I say, I'm a senior executive, I can do this. This is raw, this is all the stuff that I'm here to do, I can do. Don't do that, it will hurt. You know, even the best teams in the world, football teams or best tennis players or whatever, they all have coaches, okay? Because there's a thing about trying to do an agile transformation or adopting agility without that level of expertise and kind of, I'll use the word war wounds, experience, battle weariness, whatever, but there's a lot of stuff out there which you may not recognize. So if you try and do a transformation without professional help, it's like trying to cook cordon bleu from a recipe card. Never quite comes out as you imagine. The scary thing is it can be worse than this. So please, get some good external help with any transformation you're considering. Right, next thing, please, moving on from the alien. Don't rush off and buy tool sets. If you're doing an agile transformation, don't go, whoa, we bought Jira, done, box tick, we're agile. I have seen that. We're really agile, we're using Jira. Don't. There's lots of tools out there, don't go and buy them and think it helps you. Actually visualize your work, do stuff on walls, use Post-its. You know, rush out and buy Sharpies and Post-its, and then talk to each other. That's probably my starter, but please just don't go to the tool chest and think it will solve your problems. It won't. Equally, oh, yes, there she is. Equally, don't go and rush into a massive framework. There are frameworks out there, a whole range of them. I could list 5, 6, 7. But if you lock yourself into a big framework, you've kind of taken on all of the constraints of it. Now, every single organization is different. Now, I will mention SAFe at this point, and I'm not one of the people who just bashes SAFe for fun. Full disclosure, I'm actually a SAFe program consultant, so I'm kind of allowed to, I suppose. Anyway, frameworks like SAFe are designed for certain types of enterprise achieving certain types of thing on a certain type of delivery cadence. The model inherently contains a bunch of waste, but the waste is outweighed by the gain inside that certain type of organization. But if you apply it to another sort of organization without understanding where those wastes lie, actually you can find yourself, I wouldn't necessarily say in a worse place, but not in a much better place. It's better to have a look at what you do, understand what you're trying to achieve, and then maybe evolve or understand a framework before adopting it. But if somebody hears a buzzword like, I'll say SAFe, just because it's there, and says, let's do that then, without thinking about it, too much about it inside your context, it can also hurt you. And leading off SAFe is really designed for delivering big product. If you get your head around product, you don't really have to scale up your framework. Because if I go back 10, 15 years, we didn't really have product management that we really do today. We had large endeavor, large documents, huge stacks of requirements. We didn't have, UX engineers. I don't even think we had that as a role 10 years ago. This is kind of all new. We had stuff called UI, but there's been a huge evolution in product thinking, but also more importantly in the technology space. We aren't working with technology in the same way we did 10 or 15 years ago. So we can do tiny, tiny fragmental little pieces of thing and call it product and release it. I think Facebook does about 100 releases a day. They're not shipping Microsoft Office every time. They're shipping tiny little things. And if you're doing hundreds of tiny little things and controlling them as small items, you don't need some massive overarching governance framework to do that. I suppose the next cliched thing I'll come on to is actually Agile is a journey without destination. And I'm really happy with this. I'm certainly still on a journey. But you will find there are people who kind of want to do their Agile transformation as a checklist. Hello, that was 5, wasn't it? Yeah, great. Ooh. Yeah, that's looking good. Well, They just want to tick boxes off. Actually, have we trained the teams? Yes. OK, have we adopted a tool set? Yes. OK, can we call ourselves Agile yet? No, you haven't embodied it yet yourself. OK, well, if I tell Jeff at the golf club I have, is that all right? Yes, fine, tick, done. Please don't run transformations like that. I have seen people run Agile transformations, or attempt to, as waterfall projects. Yeah, actually, I won't take you into it, but I wrote an article some time ago on LinkedIn about why these things don't work. But it's amazing. Most people seem to think, right, we need a 2-year plan to do an Agile transformation, and let's draw it in a Gantt chart. This is incredible. So just try and remember that actually, when people describe processes like Scrum, they talked about it being a team game where they passed a problem to each other and tried to solve it and get the ball over the line. If you try and draw out a Gantt chart of the next 2 years, what you're trying to do is effectively predict the score at the end of a rugby game before the game started, and also work out where all the plays are as it went through and who got sin bin. Yeah. Take an Agile, iterative, incremental approach to anything. Experiment, prototype, kind of learn from what works inside your enterprise rather than have a guess at 2 years based on someone else's experience. So, as I've been waved at from the corner, I'll just wrap up. See what I did there? Yeah, this doesn't happen by chance. Okay, so this is a slide. This is old, but I do like this slide. So if you want to photograph any slides, photograph this one and the next one. A transformation is a complex change. You need a bunch of stuff in there. Otherwise, you'll end up in a range of pain. So make sure you've got vision, you've got skills. That's coaches, potentially. You've got incentives. Make people want to make a change. You've got resources. If you put people in new roles and they have to learn new skills, why not backfill them? Put some space in there so they can do stuff. And you need a plan, but not a Gantt chart. But you need some form of plan. You have all that, you will get change. So lastly, just to kind of help you guys, here's a summary for you to photograph. So everyone who wrote this down as I went through in their notebooks, thank you for writing it, but there it is anyway. So avoid these things. Don't go short on culture. It's all about culture. Don't run as a waterfall project. Don't think you're done when you've ticked off a bunch of activities, what I said about outcome-based planning. Make sure you get top-level leadership and HR brought in. Don't worry about hiring and firing people. People will leave. Don't underestimate how hard this is. If someone says to me, how long will an Agile transformation take? I say typically 3 years. If you do really, really well, 2. But actually, you'll then discover that the end isn't really an end. But if anyone says they can do it in a year, they can't. You can't change people that quickly. Get some coaches. Make sure you start in the right place. Don't just Scrum train the development teams. Get your process right. Understand product. Make sure everyone's involved. Don't bag an off-the-shelf framework. And don't just buy Jira and hope for the best. And have a think, and I haven't talked about it today because it's slightly shorter talk, but have a think about your rewards and recognition and progression inside your organization, because that's another area that doesn't work in the Agile sense from a traditional waterfall way. There will be other talks on that. Okay, so that was some learnings from me from faffing about in big companies for some long time. I hope you enjoyed it. Are there any questions?